Let's pray, and then let's move into the word for today. I would like you, as we're praying, just to take a couple of deep breaths and just imagine yourself as you were when you were in your teens or your 20s. And if you are in your teens and 20s now, imagine what you might be like when you're in your 50s or 60s. Just picture that person. Remember what it felt like. And all the stresses and all the joys and all the uncertainties and all the wonder. So, Father, you are the God of our lives, and we present ourselves to you. And we ask that you would speak to us this morning. Open our hearts to receive your word at whatever stage in our life we find ourselves in today, in Jesus' name. Amen. These last 2 weeks have been significant for my family. As you know, I turned 50 and my dad turned 70. And that's quite significant, I think. And so we had like a number of little celebrations and bigger celebrations over the period of that time. And I'd like to speak this morning on the subject of what I would say to my 20-something self. If I was in my 20s again, what would I say to that self? If I were able to write myself a note and put it in a time capsule and send it back in time so that it wouldn't appear in my inbox because we didn't have inboxes then, but it might appear in my letterbox of what it was when I was 20 years old, and I was to open it, what were the things I would want to say to me back then? Now, in your groups during the week, you're going to be studying this stuff, and you may have different things. I've chosen 10 things. And you may have entirely different things, and that's okay. Some of the things will undoubtedly be the same, and some of the things will be quite different because I was a different person in my 20s than perhaps you were, and there are some things I've struggled with and I've come to terms with in my later years that you didn't have a problem with. But I hope that by doing this, perhaps you can identify with some things, and perhaps if you're in my sort of age bracket, you'll go, oh yeah, I get that. I really see these things which I still need to put into my life. And if you're in a younger age bracket, you may go, there's some things which might be worth building into my life while I'm still younger. And it may be that at a later day, I do a message, 10 things my 20-year-old self would say to me now. But that's for another day. When you reach a certain age, things change. You may have noticed this. Your hair starts going grey and starts getting wiry. And where you used to have luxuriant locks, you now have this sort of, and there's very little you can do with it if you've still got some of it. Radio 2 seems far too radical. You turn it on and you think, I have no idea what they're talking about anymore. Technology moves from being a servant to being a persecutor. Anybody identify with that? Long road trips all become about plotting out restroom stops. A haircut takes less time than a nose cut, ear trims, and eyebrow maintenance. And sometimes Jo comes up to me and she says, Tom, you've got hair sprouting out of your ears. Can I do something about it? And you never think you're going to reach that stage in life where you hair in your ear becomes a real problem. You know, what's that about? And it's a real problem when it's at your nose as well, because then you trim it, and once you trim it, there's nothing there to stop the snot running out. So it's a kind of two-edged sword. And then when you reach this, there's a few people here might identify this. When you reach extreme old age, all your nose hair falls out anyway, and you're in big trouble. And so there's these stages in life, and nobody tells you this stuff, or you wouldn't sign up to it in the first place. But if I had a time machine, there were some things I would want to say to my 20-year-old self. One of them might be, bleaching your hair with toilet duck was a mistake. Getting the earring just because Matt Bourne put you up to it was a silly error. There may be some of you who are 20 now who Matt Bourne might still try and put you up to things. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And these are some things I think if I had learned back then, I would have saved myself a lot of hassle. I think I would have saved myself a lot of stress. And by nature, I'm fairly highly strung. Now only those of you who really know me well perhaps see this, because the rest of you see this guy who's like, Kung Fu Panda, like Master Shifu, inner peace. But those of you who know me well know I have an inner panda, which is just waiting to get out. Paul's talking in chapter 13, and he says this in verse 11. And at verse 9, for we know just a little bit, and we prophesy just a little bit. But when perfection is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. One of the wonderful things about getting older, we were talking earlier, and we were saying, somebody said to me, what do you love about being 50? I said, every year that goes past, the puzzle makes more sense and I'm more at peace. And that's true. There's more pieces in the puzzle fitting in. And because more pieces are in the puzzle, you start seeing what God's plan is. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And he says here, when we're children, as we're growing up, we're just seeing the parts, just the bits of the puzzle. And the puzzle doesn't really seem to make sense. Joe does these puzzles called was-gidges. And a was-gidge, you don't see the picture. All you see is a picture of what the people are looking at. So imagine I am looking at you so the picture you would see on the back of the box is, but then you have to work out what it is I'm seeing and form the picture out of the pieces of the puzzle. And that's what life is like. It's a big wasgidge. You're trying to put it together, but you don't know the picture before you start, really. And Paul says this, we just know in parts. All we got is a bunch of bits, just a box full of 1,000 pieces. But when that which is complete is come, all the parts are done away with. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. You see, all I saw was the bits and pieces. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became all grown up, I put away childish things. For now we see through a mirror darkly, but then face to face. Now I see only the bits of the puzzle, but then I shall know the complete thing. And I want to run through very, very quickly, and if you know me at all, you know what a trauma this will be to get through 10 things in the space of the next half an hour. 10 things that would have saved myself and others a lot of stress, a lot of heartache, a lot of trauma over the years. I became pastor here when I was 27. I was saved at 18 years old. I went through this blissful time between 18 and 22 when I had no real responsibilities, but I was just learning the way of Christ. And then I became a youth leader at 22 and things started going crazy, a pastor at 27, and by the time I was 29, was drinking a bottle of wine every night to try and get to sleep. Now, thank God I don't do that now. And that may come as a shock to some of you here. But those of you who are wise and knew what I was like when I was 29 will know that the frenetic level at which I lived my life was going to take a toll. It was going to take a charge, a cost. And the first thing I want to say about these 10 things that I would want to impart to you this morning is the very, very first thing. And Bruna asked me this a while back. She sat me down and said, Tom, what is the one thing you wish you had spent more time doing? And I would say this, I would have prioritized the inner life all the way through. Psalm 46, verse 10 says, be still and know. So there's a connection here to being still, which is the source of the inner life, that inner stillness. Be still and know. And there's an alternative to this, is I can be active or busy and not know. I can be still and know, or I can be frenetically busy and not know. My grandmother used to say to me again and again, Tom, because she saw what I was like. She saw me. And she said, Tom, beware of the evils of a busy life. She was speaking it, I realize now, prophetically into my life, because she understood, she had a wisdom that age brought that I didn't understand at that time. And she's saying, Tom, with your particular personality, if you don't learn to be still, your predisposition towards activism will get you into trouble. And the space between being 18 years old and 22 years old was tremendous because I had nothing to do, and the church I was in was very good at giving you nothing to do. As a young person, they saw gifting in you, and the one thing they saw incredible gifting, and the more gifting they saw in you, the more they'll just sort of put you to the side, really. And the point was this, is they would not let you go, let your gifting take you where your character could not sustain you. And I found that very, very frustrating. I found it very, very frustrating is a very polite way of putting it. I chafed against that. And many, many years later, when I sat with Andy Hunter and he spoke to me about it, and he said, Tom, I saw the gifting in you. I saw what you had, and I saw the potential for greatness, and I saw the potential for disaster in equal measure. And that's why I consistently had you sitting on the sidelines so you could learn the things you could only learn in obscurity. And in that time, and I thank God for it, is I learned to pray. With nothing to do, no busy work to do, I learned to pray. I learned to seek God. I learned to spend what it was to spend hours in His presence with no agenda, nobody really to pray for, no great thing to do, but to seek Him. And Andy kept feeding me books like this, and which taught me this inner life. And then I moved to another church which had a different kind of approach, and they plugged me into ministry. And at 22, as a youth leader, and got very, very busy. And really, this inner life got put on hold due to the busyness of ministry. And I remember sitting with the guy who led me to the Lord, and he was a Methodist minister, and a lovely guy. And he had got born again and went into the Methodist ministry. And he sat me down with tears in his eyes. And I went to visit him one day. And he said, Tom, I work 90-hour weeks. He said, and in the last 6 months, I haven't had a moment to open the Bible or to pray or to do anything that's spiritual unless it is to prepare for sermons or prepare for counseling. And he ended up leaving the ministry because that's not what he wanted in life. And for me, this very first thing to prioritize this inner life, if I was doing it all again, I would have, even if God had brought me into ministry at a young age, I would have done half of what I did and prayed a lot more than what I did. I would have spent a lot more in prayer and meditation and contemplation, a lot more time doing the inner gardening, dealing with the inner knots in my life, which would have saved me a lot of money at the off license. It was incredible to hear Pastor Brian Houston talking at the men's conference a number of years ago, and he was talking about how he ended up with an addiction to sleeping pills and a similar kind of situation there. I would say to you, prioritize the inner life, for out of this inner life, everything flows. Everything flows. Everything flows. And that which doesn't flow out of our inner life is wood, hay, and stubble. In that day, so much of what we are and so much of what we've done and so much of what we see as our ministry and our destiny, we realize as it's burning up on that day, and Jesus says our works will burn up if they're birthed out of the gold of the presence of Christ, that we'll realize it was wood and hay and stubble. It wasn't evil. It wasn't bad. It had the right intentions, but it didn't flow out of the inner life. First thing, prioritize the inner life. Second thing I would say to my 20-something self is focus on people, not projects. It's linked. Focus on people, not projects. I remember my mum saying to me again and again as I was growing up, keep visiting your nan and granddad because you don't know how long they're going to be around. And whenever we drive to Margate, and we go down there quite a bit, we drive past where my nan and granddad lived. And every time we go past, I always say, hi nan, hi granddad, miss you. And I really do, and I really wish I had spent more time about them as people and understanding them. And I spent quite a bit of time with them, but it was always about, I just wanted to tell them about my projects and the latest things that I was doing. And I wish I had sat down and listened to them and found out what made them tick, because at the end of the day, projects are easy compared with people. See, projects need management, and there are tools we can use to do management. There are wonderful online tools for projects, Gantt charting and all these sort of things. If you've noticed, you can't Gantt chart human beings. You can't use management tools. And actually, if you try to use management tools on human beings, pretty soon they suss it and they resent it. Projects need management, but people need love. But both of those things need your time, and you've only got time for one or the other most of the time. The only job that you and I have in this world, if you're only going to write one thing down, write this down. The only job that you and I have in this world is to love it. To love the people in it. So that's what preaching the gospel is. The gospel is a gospel of love. You can't separate the gospel from love. That's the teaching of 1 Corinthians 13. You can't separate the two. Paul says, even if I give my body to be burned and have not love, it profits me nothing. The one job I have in this world, and the one thing I'm going to be judged on, is whether I love the people of this world and I love the creatures of this world, which is why Jesus says, preach the gospel to all of creation. Whether I loved all of creation and I gave my life for that, or whether I loved my projects, or whether I loved my latest plans, and we spiritualize it, and we say, oh, it's my ministry, it's my destiny, and we have these wonderful words for it, and I had all those same words in my 20s, and I realize now that much of that for me, And I can only say for me, much of that for me was me trying to prove something to myself that I had it, that Tom Griffiths was somebody, because I felt I was nobody. But if I had only spent more time with the Lord and I heard the Lord say, Tom, you are someone because you're my son, then maybe I would have had a lot more time for people and I wouldn't have needed the time for the projects, because people are God's great project. All I have to do each day when I go to bed is say, did I love people? Now, you may work in the city. Your job is still to love people. And you say, man, how do I do that? If I'm an analyst or I'm this or I'm that. Well, the person sitting in the cubicle next to you needs love. Let's not over-spiritualize this. You don't all have to do the job of Mother Teresa, because we're all in the place of having opportunities to love the people around us. If you're involved in investment, make it ethical. Make it in a way that loves. I met somebody the other day who's involved in providing microloans for people in the 2/3 world to help them get out of the poverty trap. And just listening to her heart as she was sharing this, how she saw that a little bit of money can change a life. You see, 1 Corinthians 13, let's read the whole thing. That's that scripture we were in. And we realize this. He says, though I speak with tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I've become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so as I could move mountains and have not love, I'm nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not love, it profits me nothing. You see, Paul's saying the thing we have to become experts at is love. And it's the one thing you can't go to university to learn. You should start that, the University of Love. I think we'd have a lot of sign-ups. Love. Wouldn't that be an amazing thing, though? Seriously. Put your dirty mind aside. A place where at the end of your end of everybody's education, you had a year where they just taught you how to love people, how to care for people. They taught you, for the last year of it was compulsory. You were taught, and part of it was teaching you how to love young people, children, how to play with them, how to be part of their life, how to be great parents, how to love your parents as they're getting older, how to look after older people, how to deal with people who are at this last stages of their life, how to care for the dying, how to care for people who are in middle life and are just going over the edge, their life is falling to pieces, how to care for the poor and the needy. Wouldn't that be an incredible thing? Don't you think the world would be changed? Man. University, there's a project worthy. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not lift itself up. It's not puffed up. It does not behave unseemly. It doesn't seek her own. She's not easily provoked. She doesn't get offended very easily. He doesn't think evil, rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. There it is. You see, as we start seeing the whole picture. I went to see my dear friend and mentor, my old chemistry teacher, Ian Bailey, the other day. He's had 2 strokes. He's been in since Christmas in a hospital recovering. And when I went to see him, an inspirational man, And when I went to see him, and I was concerned about what it would be like for somebody who had lost a lot of the use of his right side and much of his speech, somebody who was had a PhD in quantum physics, what it is for somebody like that not be able to speak much. And I walked in, and he grabbed me, and he lifted me up, and he swung me round and put me down, and he did the same to Joe. And he said, "I can walk, look!" And he walked. And with broken speech, he told me all the things he could do instead of all the things he couldn't do. And it was full of joy, unspeakable. And it really was unspeakable and full of glory. But the one thing he kept saying is this. He said, "Everything is one. Everything is one. It's all one." You see, he had got to this place in 1 Corinthians 13 where he had seen all the puzzle. At the age he is now, all the pieces of the puzzle are falling into place. And he said, it's all one, and it's all beautiful, and it's all love. Focus on people, not projects. Number 3, shut up and listen. Turn to your neighbour. Say to them, you need to listen more. I know if you're married that makes problems, but there we go. Proverbs 18:13. I got to get through this. Proverbs 18:13 says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is foolish and shameful. We read it again. If somebody gives an answer before he hears, it is foolish and shameful. Men, we do this all the time, do we not? Joe sometimes says to me, she's talking away, and I'm going, yep. She's great. Can you do it then? Huh? What have I just agreed to? If somebody gives an answer before he hears, I love the way it's a masculine here. Before he hears, it's foolish. We've got 2 ears and one mouth. See, to learn, I must humble myself and listen. If I was going to talk back to my 20-year-old self, I would say, shut up. Shut up. Isn't it frustrating when you're trying to do something, you're trying to teach your child to do something? You know, the kids are growing up, and you say, I'm going to teach you how to bake a cake. And you say, now what you do is you get the eggs, and they say, yeah, I know. No, you don't know, you moron. That's why I'm telling you. I know. But if we learn just to be quiet, we start learning how much we know, how much we don't know. Listen to this. The quieter you become, the more you can hear. Wisdom is available, taught in the baby's cry and the words of old women, in the flight of the eagle and the roots of the trees. It is in the soil, the soul, the songs, the stories, and the spirit of all that lives. Wisdom is there. Read the book of Proverbs and you'll find this Solomon talking about all these different places you can find wisdom if only you stop long enough to listen. I've got a place I go to the woods when I can't find the answers, and I've got an old tree I sit in, and you won't find me there. But I sit in the tree and I talk to the tree. Don't worry, I'm not going crazy. But I just talk, and I talk it out, and then I just sit. And let creation answer. Let the Lord speak to me through the things he created. Let him tell me about when I see the birds flying, and I see the clouds, and I see the blue sky, and you see these things, and God speaks night after night. The scripture says he speaketh forth knowledge in the stars themselves. A billion galaxies out there, and 10 billion stars in our galaxy. What are they formed for? The scripture says they're formed to utter knowledge to us. Do you get the feeling that we're not listening much if we need that much amplification just to get the message? Wisdom is available, and it's in these small things. The baby's cry, the words of old women, the flight of the eagle, the root of the trees, the soil, the soul, the songs, the stories, and the spirit of all that lives. Number fourth thing I'd say to myself is this: follow your bliss. Follow your bliss. Your path, your destiny, your path in life is the one that will ultimately bring peace, happiness, contentment, and a sense of well-being. I'm going to say that again because some of you are on such a guilt trip about this that you couldn't believe that to be true. Your path is the one that brings peace, happiness, contentment, and a sense of well-being. We looked at it last week, didn't we? The kingdom of God is not meat and drink, but righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Ghost. So the path for you, Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He might have said, my path for you, my destiny for you is easy and it's light. The problem is in the West, most of us are so screwed up by feelings of guilt that we always feel we should be punished. And if God doesn't punish us, we punish ourselves. Right? And it may be through workaholism. It may be through alcoholism. It may be through just finding the worst possible thing that I hate most and doing it just to prove. Just to prove to myself how horrible I am. It might be because I just have the expectations of other people who have their own guilt issues and want to project them onto me. Why should you be happy? You're a pastor. You're not meant to be happy. But I truly believe, and I've discovered in life, that when I've truly been walking in my path, sometimes, there's times of difficulty and there's times of stress and strain, don't get me wrong. But when I've really been in my lane, the traffic gets out of the way for me. If I'm sitting in the lane and I'm hooting the horn and I'm angry and I can't get on and I'm frustrated, it's not my lane. And it may be that I need to change lanes. Now, it may be I need to go into the fast lane. It may be that I need to swap into the slow lane for a while. Because your lane, God's going to make a way. Like in India, you own a car in India, you travel there, it's amazing. There's no rules whatsoever. Everybody hoots all the time. But no matter how fast you go, everything just seems miraculous. It just gets out of your way. I've never seen an accident in India, but here I see them every day. And I wonder whether it's got something to do with the lack of rules. That means people use their common sense more. I don't know. Follow your bliss. Follow your bliss. Don't do something that makes you miserable. Life's too short for that. My old Uncle Horace, he used to say, whenever you saw him, he'd turn to you and say, are you happy? Are you doing what makes you happy? And if you go, he'd say, why not? Why aren't you doing what makes you happy? Why? Do you really think that God made you in a certain way that puts a smile on your face and a sense of joy and happiness, and then he says, by the way, you're never going to do that thing because I hate you that much? No, he put that happiness inside you to be a guide as to what your path is. And when you find that, you might not meet other people's expectations. You might overachieve other people's expectations, but you're in your lane, and your lane is good. Follow your bliss. Fifth, here's a practical thing: start a pension. My old pastor taught me to tithe. He didn't teach me to start a pension. I wish he had taught me both. Now these days it's a lot easier because mandatorily you have to have a pension. But as soon as you get your first job, let me throw this out there. As soon as you get your first job, take the first 10% and give it to God. Take the second 10% and put it in your pension. Just do it. Just do it and spend your life living off 80%. You will be happier in retirement and you'll be more prosperous in life, because that's how seed time and harvest works. Ever so simple. I'm not going to elaborate on it any more than that. But from the moment you get your first job to the moment you drop dead, take 10% of what you have, give 10% to God, sow it, and give the other 10%, put it in your pension for when you retire. And even if you don't care about your retirement, it will save your children a lot of hassle later on. 6, don't sweat the small stuff. I sweated about a lot of small stuff which wasn't important at all when I was 20 years old. Very often we mistake caring and stress. We assume that because we care, we need to be stressed about things. Actually, when you're really stressed about something, it often makes it harder for you to properly care, because when you're stressed, you don't see correctly, you don't see clearly. There's a thing I've started using, which I love over the last few years. I call it the 1,000-year rule. I think I made it up, so I don't need to give credit here. And it's this. Everything that's starting to stress me out, I stop and I say, is this going to matter in 1,000 years' time? Just do it now. Just take a moment. Think about the things that stress you out. Is this really going to matter in 1,000 years' time? Probably not. Probably not. Now, the things that are going to matter in 1,000 years' time, they're the things to focus on. They're the things to put your energies into. But pretty much everything else don't matter. Doesn't matter. Actually, I've discovered that almost nothing matters. Almost nothing. Out of I'm not saying that nothing matters, but what I'm saying about all the things we fill our head with stress and worry and concern about, nothing, it just doesn't matter in the over. Somebody said to me the other day, they said, what are we going to do about Brexit? What are you going to do if Brexit doesn't happen, or if Brexit does happen? I said, do you know what I'm going to do? Either way, I'm going to plant my new potatoes soon. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my beans and I'm going to put them in the ground and I'm going to water them. They said to some members of the WHO, it was on the Sky News this morning, they caught them, and they said, what do you think Brexit's going to do to the rock industry? And I can't remember, who was the lead singer? Was it Roger Daltrey? He turns to him and he says, F off! As the member of the WHO would do. And they said, no, really, what do you think about Brexit? And he said, it's not going to affect rock and roll. We were playing in Europe in the WHO before we even went into Europe. Oh, there's a little wisdom there. Just, I'm not saying that if it's your job to make those decisions, you might have, but, I made my vote one way or the other. There's nothing else I can do about it. I'm not going to stress about it now. It's out of my control right now. I can pray about it, and I can plant my potatoes. Don't sweat it. Number 7, slow down. This is what I would say to me, because this is one of the problems that caused a lot of problems for me. Those of you who have been in the church with 23 years now, you will have seen a lot of people, and one of the things we broke our heart is that to get where we are today, we burnt a lot of people out. A lot of good people who came and were very enthusiastic. And because of the nature of it, we had very few workers and things were happening, lots of new Christians. We were burning people out very, very fast. And I would say to my 20-year-old self, you need to slow down. Let me read to you this from the Message. Jeremiah 2:25. I love this. You ready for it? Jeremiah speaking. So God speaking to Jeremiah. Slow down. Take a deep breath. What's the hurry? Why wear yourself out? Just what are you after anyway? But you say, I can't help it. I'm addicted to alien gods. I just can't quit. 2,800 years later, a word in season. Slow down. Take a deep breath. What's the hurry? Why wear yourself out? Just what are you after anyway? But you say, I can't help it. I'm addicted to alien gods. I just can't quit. I went to the gym on my 50th birthday, and I was feeling pretty self-righteous about it. And I was on the bench press machine. Come on, still got it. And there's a guy next to me, and we got talking, and he said, oh, hi. So I steered the conversation round, a little bit subtly. So he said, how old are you? Thank you. I'm 50. Check me out. It's okay. And I looked at him, and he was benching twice my amount. I said, how old are you? He said, I'm 76. Oh, Lord. And I sat and I said to him, you're inspirational. And I got talking to him. His name's Dave. Every time I've gone to that gym since, me and Dave have a little chat. And which is a little bit uncomfortable sometimes because you know what it's like in the changing rooms. I'm one of these guys I cover up in the changing rooms. Dave's not. And we have these conversations. I sat and I listened to him. As we talked, we realized we knew the same people going right back. He learnt karate from the person who I learnt karate from, who's now in his late 80s, and he knew him when he was a young man. And we got talking so many things, and that simply happened because I didn't have my earphones in. I don't even wear earphones in the gym. I want to engage with the people around me. Now, I also want to work out, but I've realized that even more than working out, the person on the bench next to me is the most important thing going on right now, because the only job I have is to love people. See, to slow down means that I don't miss what I was born for. If I've got my headphones in, if I'm doing this in order to get to here, everything that God's got for me in this, I miss. Because I'm trying to get to here, which is where I think God's got for me. But when I get here, which is the office, I'm then trying to get home so I can be with my family. It's good here, and I miss what God's got for me here. And we're constantly pushing ourselves forward, trying to get to this place of destiny, missing out what God's plan for me is. And finally, I find my place of destiny when I'm lying down in a 6x2 coffin. And I've missed my points of destiny all through my life. And Dave was a destiny moment for me. And for him, I believe. You see, acceleration causes you to miss the details. Just as when you're on one of those old roundabouts, you know the old kids' roundabouts? And you used to spin. And when you get to the periphery, you're going like, your skin's back here. But if you sit in the center, it doesn't even feel like it's moving. And if you sit in the middle and you look out, or if you stand on the edge and you look out, all you can see is the things are going past like a blur. But if you turn 180 degrees and look towards the center, everything stays still. You're still traveling at the same speed. Your viewpoint's changed. When I slow down, it's like being on the roundabout. I'm not going to drop out of society and buy a VW camper and disappear necessarily. But what I am going to do is in that which I'm doing on the periphery, I'm going to turn 180 degrees. And I'm not going to keep my eyes on this, which is flying past on the outside. I'm going to keep my eyes on the center point where all is still. And there I start noticing what's really happening in my world. And God, when you read those stories of Smith Wigglesworth, go out and he'd be in a bus and he would see somebody next to him and the person had, a leg that was in tatters and he would pray and that person would get healed. His secret wasn't in that he had healing powers. You have healing powers. His secret is that he was still long enough to realize. You and I, we get on the bus, we don't even see the person next to us. Life happens in the periphery. It happens in the margins. We had a margin moment the other day. We were in sanctuary at the morning shift, and I was having breakfast with a guy called Atik. And some of you will know Atik. And Atik was telling me his story a lovely guy, full of energy and he was very, very happy and very well-balanced guy. And I said, man, what happened to you? And he said, I escaped from Afghanistan. And I said, Atiq, well, he's about 26, I guess now. I said, what happened to you? He said, I was a kid at the time. He said, I was 14 years old, and my parents, my father fought with the Mujahideen, and they'd never forgiven him. The Taliban had never forgiven him for that, and they came back and wanted him to send his son, Atiq, to go and be a suicide bomber. And his mum said no. And Atiq said no. And he said one day they came and they killed every member of my family. He said they basically brought the house down. And he said my mum and dad died, my brother and sister died, and all their family, everybody died. I was the only person who survived in that house. He said, and I ran. And twice he managed to get, at 14 years old, twice he managed to get as far as Turkey to be sent back. And on the third time he got through, he walked overland all the way through Europe, and finally ended up in the UK hitching a lift on a truck. And I sat and I listened to his story, and I thought, what is my excuse? And I said to him, Atiq, that story is worth telling. Now he's illiterate. He can't write it down. But through that journey, see what a journey for a 14-year-old to make. Two things here is that we were there able to listen. And so we had that moment with him. It was a destiny moment. Somebody listened to that poor kid's story and said that is worth something. It has value. It made me realize how much value the small steps of our life make. Number 8, get out more. Get out more. Psalm 33, verse 6 says this: by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all of the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. By the word, underline that, circle it, and then circle the word breath and put a little line between those two. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. Get out more. See what's out there. You know, the Franciscans call creation the first gospel. That's their word for it. They say before Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote the gospel, God wrote the first gospel in creation. And we miss it. Until I became a pastor, I lived pretty much an outdoor life. As a kid, I grew up in Abbey Wood, and I spent most of my time when I wasn't at school out in the Abbey Woods, as it was then, building tree houses and camps and so on. When I went to Margate at 10 years old, I remember as a kid sitting sometimes for half a day, just sitting watching the waves. Sitting on the beach, just chilling, watching what was happening, exploring the area around me, climbing trees, building tree houses. This outdoor life. I became a builder and then a window cleaner. And I remember working as in these outdoor things. I never, ever wanted to do an indoor job. That was toxic to me. I wanted to be out where I could feel the wind in my hair. I could feel the sun on my face, and I remember getting up. We used to get up early in the morning, go out, clean windows. A lot of the Christians were window cleaners for this very reason. And clean windows, get our round done. In Margate, you could earn a shed load of money cleaning windows because of the salt spray and so on. We'll do all that, and then just after midday, we'd normally meet up for a bit of breakfast in one of the cafes with all the other Christians who were also window cleaners. And then about sort of 2 o'clock, we'd finish and you'd all go to the gym together, and then you'd go down the beach. Go to the gym, work out, go down the beach, top up your tan in the summer. And it was a wonderful life. And the thing I found is that the outdoor life is therapy, and it kept you centered. And a lot of the things in our modern society, we have to do in order to stop ourselves going totally insane are not a problem in a society which is more outdoors. And so I would say to my 20-year-old self, if you're going to be a pastor, make sure you put your bench, your table, your desk outside. Try and be out. That's why we started an allotment, is so I could do work outside, so I could be outside. And I sometimes say to people, if they want to spend time with me, look, here's my allotment, I'll see you down there. W.H. Davies said, "What is this life if full of care? We have no time to stop and stare, no time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep or cows. No time to see when woods we pass where squirrels hide their nuts in grass. No time to see in broad daylight streams full of stars like skies at night. A poor life this, if full of care, we have no time to stop and stare." You see, when you see a cow in a field just munching on the grass and just looking around, it's not wasting its life, it's being a cow. It's being exactly what it was intended to be. When you see a star starring in the sky, you think, what a waste. Why isn't it doing more? Why isn't it more productive? No, it's just starring. That's what it's designed to be. When you see an earthworm crawling in the soil, you think, why doesn't it set up cities and build buildings? And why doesn't it do this? Why doesn't it build temples? And no, it's just worming. That's what worms are meant to do. But the thing is, human beings, we don't know what we're meant to do. And that's why we do everything else. Because we've forgotten what we are. You see, we're human beings, not human doings. When we discover through that first thing, that inner journey, that focus on the inner life, what we are, then we can stop and stare, and it no longer seems to be a waste of time for us, but it seems to be like the very best thing we could possibly do. Ninth thing, very simple, very quick. I would say to myself, keep training. Don't stop working out. No, I didn't. I never did. Since the time I was in my 20 years old, I've worked out, I've trained. But I would say to you this morning, you're never too old to start. Strength training, bit of cardio, flexibility. Keep at it. Keep at it. Keep at it. Don't go, I'm 50 years old. I don't need to do something now. My mum is in her 70s and she still goes to the gym. She doesn't deadlift, but she goes and does stuff. 10th and final thing, never be too busy to laugh. One of the great problems is, for me in my 20s, is I got so serious. No, probably in my 30s. Actually, my 20s were okay. But as I reached my 30s, I got real serious. The scripture says, laughter does you good just like medicine. A merry heart does you good just like medicine. It's great. I laughed when I was up here this morning and I saw Jo with her pedal board. She's got a cough at the moment and I noticed she's got some Cavonia on there just in case. But better than any medicine is to laugh. They've proven this now. Science has proven this, that it's better to laugh. It releases all the endorphins. It boosts your immune system. Have you ever seen the laughing, they call it the laughing Buddha, that big fat sort of Buddha, which is normally gold and is laughing? Have you ever seen that? You go to the Chinese takeaway and you see that. It's not a Buddha, they call it that. It's a Chinese Zen saint called Ho Tai. And Ho Tai was a Zen monk who was a young man, and he was a big guy. You know the difference between him and the statues of the Buddha, because the Buddha is always a thin guy, athletic-looking guy. But this guy was a big guy, and he was desperately trying to find the answer to life. And he set himself to seek. And the story says that he was a natural guy. He lived about 1,000 years ago. And when he finally realized, he got enlightenment, and he realized what it was all about, he spent the rest of his life sitting by the side of the road just laughing. And people would stop and he would just laugh. He'd say, it's just a joke. It doesn't matter. All this stuff that you're freaking out about, it doesn't matter. Almost all of it doesn't matter. And the stuff that does matter, you're going to be much better placed to deal with it if you've got a smile on your lips and joy in your heart. And to this day, he's known as the laughing Buddha. And I wonder how many saints and Christian saints are shown laughing. I cannot think of a single one. In the pictures, they always look like they've just been baptized in lemon juice. I wouldn't want to join that church. Well, what about it? You don't have to be as fat as the laughing Buddha, but you do to have the smile. You can be a thin laughing Buddha as well. Those are the 10 things I would say to myself. Let me run through them as they come up. Band comes up. I would say to myself, prioritize your inner life. I would say to myself, focus on people, not projects. I would say to myself, shut up and listen. I would say to myself, follow your bliss. Do what makes you happy. I would remind myself to start a pension, not to sweat the small stuff, to slow down. I would remind myself to get out more, to keep training, and to never, ever stop laughing. 11th, I would remind myself to always finish your message on time. Thank you for bearing with me. Amen. God bless.